We are set for the final 2 weeks of the regular season of high school football in Northwest Arkansas and the River Valley. Huge games this week all over the state. We'll look back on last week's results, all this and more on this week's Prep Rally.
You're watching the Prep Rally Podcast.
Welcome to the Prep Rally Podcast, sponsored by West Termite Pest and Lawn. I'm Graham Thomas with the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, along with NWADG Rick Fires and Leland Barclay joining us from the River Valley. And gentlemen, let's jump right into it. So Bentonville Tigers are not dead after all, as we saw last week. Picking up the 28-21 victory at Rogers, rallying behind the third-string quarterback. Springdale, Har-Ber, and Fort Smith Southside putting up huge offensive numbers and points. Farmington with a big upset. We've got so much to talk about. So, Rick, let's start over at Rogers, where Bentonville, behind a third-string quarterback, pulls off yet another win in the Battle of Benton County, 28-21 over Rogers.
Now, how do I say this kid's name? Cole Slepecki?
Slepecki.
Well, anyway.
They called him Slep, I think.
Okay, I'll go with Slep. Yeah, I'll go with Slep. Man, you know what? That's a tough assignment against Rogers Mounties. You know, so many things can go wrong, and you're the third-string guy, and the pressure's on you. And he just came through, didn't make a lot of mistakes. Of course, when you got C.J. Brown out there, he threw a couple of touchdown passes to C.J. Brown. That was a really good bounce-back win for Bentonville. They're now 5-3 overall, 4-1 in conference. They're right there. Still, a lot of things can happen as we go down the stretch right here.
Yeah, it was an interesting night in Rogers. I'll just tell you that. The Mounties did some things that I really wasn't expecting, quite honestly, going into it. And they were making some moves that they felt like they had to make to try and win that ball game, which, and Leland, I know you and I talked about it some. The Mounties, what they did was Dane Williams, they moved him to defense. They say he's the best safety they've got, but when he's playing quarterback, they just can't play him a lot on defense. Mm-hmm. And so they put Jansen Garner in at quarterback in the second quarter. I don't know if they had planned. I think they were just trying to give them a little bit of a jump start originally. What he did was he ended up leading them on a touchdown drive right before half to make it 14-7. And so they stuck with him at quarterback. Dane went to go play safety. The rest of the game had some big hits on defense, and but at the end of the day, it wasn't enough. Rogers had a couple of turnovers in the fourth quarter, one pick in the end zone.
Oh, right.
And, so they weren't able to win. So moving forward this week, it'll be interesting to see, Leland, what the Mounties decide to do with some more big games coming up for them.
Yeah, because, third place is wide open at this point in the 7A West, and that's such a huge draw in the playoffs. You still get to play in the first round, but you get the 6th seed out of the Central, which is a very winnable game for anybody, any of the three teams that's vying for that third spot. And I get, the Dane Williams wanting him on defense. Northside made a similar switch last year when they moved, Poom Savoy from quarterback to defense, because after the first 5 games, they looked at it and said, we've got to shore up the defense. Rogers probably did the same thing. Now, they probably did it in anticipation of going against a wide open passing attack, and then Bentonville had to make the switch. And instead, they run the ball 33 times for 178 yards and only throw 11 passes. So, still able to win. Bentonville only had 9 first downs in that game, but they had a 78-yard touchdown pass to C.J. Brown and then a 66-yard touchdown run by Battle. So, it'll be interesting these last few weeks, because now Southside and Bentonville West are playing a big game on Friday night that's going to impact probably that third seed as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned Christian Battles. What a game he had. He had 128 yards rushing, I think, and his biggest game. He's been kind of the number 2 guy behind Jason Gilmore on that Bentonville offense. But Both those guys are certainly capable. We've seen Rick and I have seen Gilmore have some big games too. So, um, we'll just see moving forward. It's very interesting situations from that ball game.
What's it that time of year? You've been through non-conference. Now you're coming down to stress conference, and people have been banged up, and you're still, we still got to have other people step up and come to the forefront. And it sounds like that's what's happening over there.
Yeah, man, I just could not. I was following Harold McIlvain's tweet thread or X thread, whatever you call these things now, X, Twitter, whatever it is. Anyway,
formerly Twitter, now known as X.
He's just firing away with these updates on that Springdale Har-Ber Southside game, and at the end of the day, 77-54, 131 points, Jeez. Just gobs and gobs of offense. I didn't realize a basketball game was going to break out down there, Leland.
Yeah, 1,285 yards of offense, 9 rushing touchdowns by Southside, 51 carries for 554 yards. Of course, Amari Tucker, 24 for 302 and 3 touchdowns. Quarterback Carter Zimmerman, 13 carries for 162 and 2 touchdowns. And then Isaac Gregory, 12 carries for 93 yards and 4 touchdowns. So they'll have plenty of, momentum going into that game next week. And, of course, Hayden Wood, you can't forget, about his performance for Har-Ber. Our Braden Sprague, 24-44 for 371 and 6 touchdowns, 5 of which went to Hayden Wood.
Now, guys, I know I'm old school, and I prefer those 21-14 games where the games are over by 10 o'clock. But my goodness, how do you score 54 points and still lose? I guess because the other team scored 77, but it's just amazing to me. Maybe I need to delve into that big up feature story or something. I just can't understand how nobody can. In some of these games, you can't stop anybody. I mean, I can go through the archives from teams 20 years. This would be like some of these stats from half a year on some of these players. It's just mind-boggling to me.
If you look in the second quarter alone, I mean that's enough to have a full game story right there, and then some.
68 points. 68 points
in one quarter.
In the second quarter.
That's just unbelievable.
That's unbelievable.
Southside scored 6 touchdowns in the second quarter. Grayson York, Southside's kicker, was 11 for 11 on extra points.
Wow. So elsewhere in the 7A West Conference, so we had Bentonville West with a 53-0 win over Rogers Heritage, and kind of the interesting note out of that one is we believe we had an ejection for Heritage coach Brian Pratt, and for him to I know he must have been really upset.
Who'd you say was ejected?
Brian Pratt, the Bentonville West head coach. Yeah. And we were talking about this amongst ourselves. It's really, really difficult to get. I mean, you just don't see it a whole lot like you do in baseball. They'll throw you out on basically for arguing balls and strikes. But in football, it's really hard to get even that first flag. And I know that he must have been really upset about something, because it's a ball game against Heritage, and I've not talked to Coach Pratt about it, but. So he'll have to sit out the first half of this week's game against Southside. That's significant, guys.
Yep.
So, and then just an exciting, the Rogers Bentonville game, that was our headliner. But that Southside Har-Ber game, I knew it was going to be high scoring. I just never in my wildest dreams did I imagine it was going to be that high of a scoring of a contest. So.
Well, it's amazing. Harold was able to get that game story in a timely fashion.
Man, it's hard. He was one of the last ones in. I saw that come through.
I got done about maybe noon the next day.
Well, Fayetteville Bulldogs, they keep on rolling with a 52-15 win against Springdale High. And the rest of their schedule, they've got Rogers Heritage this week in Har-Ber. So, I just don't see anyone.
They They just got to keep, just focused, and they should be the undefeated conference champ. But we'll see. Sports is the ultimate reality, and like who expected? Who was it? Farmington beat Shiloh. So I mean that's what high school football is all about. Wasn't that something?
So that's a great segue into the 5A West log jam at the top now with 3 teams tied at 4-1. Did not have Farmington beating Shiloh Christian.
Nope.
I don't know that anybody did except probably those boys from Farmington.
Yeah, exactly.
And
good for them.
That was a heck of a win for Coach Eldridge and the Cardinals. Leland, I don't know what your take on that one was. I'm sure you didn't have that one on your bingo card either.
No, I think it is probably, I guess Parkview's win over Bryant might be the upset of the year, of the regular season anyway, up to this point. But I think Farmington's win over Shiloh Christian is probably the second biggest win, or maybe the upset of the regular season, because of the fact of, Shiloh Christian just hammered Little Rock Christian, which is their only loss.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like Shiloh Christian was just kind of isolated in their, nestled up in the corner of Northwest Arkansas. They went to Little Rock Christian and won big in a non-conference game. So the fact that Farmington was able to pull that off, especially when you consider Farmington had they're basically a backup quarterback to start the season, and Farmington had lost their first conference game of the season. So, you put those 2 things together, or 3 or 4 things together, and I think it's the upset of the year, or at least second in the state and the biggest one in our conference. And what it now does in the 5A West, Alma is the only team that completely controls its own destiny, because if they went out, they're going to be number 1 seed, period. Shiloh Christian can't say that, or, I mean, they control it, but they've got to have some help to get that number 1 seed, and Farmington has to have some help to get that number 1 seed. So Alma's the only team in the conference that holds their own destiny in their hand.
And even more about Farmington, when I remember our media day, and I did a piece on Cameron Van Zant. I mean, going into senior year, he was our shine on, our spotlight guy. And then, when he went down, unfortunately, with another injury, and then they lost a game or 2, and I forgot about Farmington. Basically, I'm not ashamed to miss it, man. So good for them, man. They've got a great coach over there, and he's been mixing and matching, and Luke Elsick and other guys. So hats off to Farmington.
Now, you mentioned Alma there. I mean, they've still got to play Shiloh Christian, and I think from the schedule standpoint, I think Farmington's road may be a little bit easier in these next 2 games than, say, Shiloh or Alma. But we'll see how it shakes out. I know Farmington goes to Pea Ridge this week, which isn't no easy task.
No.
I mean, Pea Ridge will be ready for that one.
Coming off a win.
But I mean, the conference just took a whole new twist.
Yes,
this
absolutely.
last week for sure. Let's talk about the 4A1. Elkins smashes Ozark. That game was over quick. Walter had that one in really quick to us, and so that Elkins has moved, clear into the driver's seat, and now we got some teams that are battling for position. 5 teams out of that 4A1 are going to make the playoffs. So you got Ozark and Gravette, you got Gentry and Lincoln, all kind of battling out for those final 4 spots. And, we're going to have more information after this week, Rick.
Yeah, I covered the game at Lincoln on Friday. Really impressed, man. You talking about putting up some points. Lincoln beat Gentry, I think it was 53-34. The previous week, they scored 63 points against Huntsville. Lincoln, wow, Drew Moore, senior quarterback. They've really got, the running game and the passing game and just enough defense. And I'm going to do a story on them. They're 6-2, and for Lincoln, man, they've had some down years. 40 years ago, and they've had from Brad Harrison, they had a few good years from Coach Harrison, and one or two, but they've had a lot of down seasons. So really impressed with what Lincoln's doing this year under Reed Mendoza.
Meanwhile, Elkins is kind of quietly going about their business at 8-0 and just, scoring 58 points a game or something like that. I mean, just, really just some crazy numbers they're putting up, and they're going to host Gentry this week. And I mean, I just don't know that I see anybody stopping Elkins until they get to the playoffs, if they're stopped there. Leland.
Yeah, the 4A is going to be interesting because Elkins, and I think we thought that Elkins was going to be a contender all season, with that 1-2 punch. But I tell you what was impressive Friday night after talking to or getting a couple of texts and things from Walter, and even talking to, Jeremy Burns, the coach at Ozark last week, is Elkins' defense is really good.
Yeah,
They're very
shutout,
deep.
yeah.
They play a lot of players, and their defense probably doesn't get the notoriety that it should for their success so far.
Yeah. Let's go down to the River Valley and talk about the game you were at, Leland. Boonville over Charleston. And, I got to give it to those Charleston Tigers, man. They were scrapping and clawing, and they had an 8-6 lead at halftime. But Boonville with the big second half, and Dax Goff with another big night gets the win.
Yeah, Charleston came out and opening kickoff, they recovered an onside kick. So they didn't score on that after that. They went 3 and out, in fact. But that was kind of gave an indication that, they were in that game to win it for sure. And they were up 8-0 early. Reese Mariska caught a 26-yard touchdown pass from Eli Huck. And then Mariska took the direct snap on the 2-point conversion, and it's 8-0. Boonville came back and put together a long drive right before the half, and Dax Goff scored the first of his 4 touchdowns.
Big night.
On a 1-yard run. And then in the third quarter, they stopped Charleston on the opening kickoff, and then Boonville scored on 3 straight possessions. Dax Goff reeled off touchdown runs of 26, 63, and 38 yards after 3 straight defensive stops on 4th down for Boonville's defense. And Dax Goff ended up with 27 carries for 275 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, he could have been a player of the week candidate for sure. But, we talk about Dax Goff every week on this podcast.
Great high school player.
So, and we kind of jumped down to the 3A1 there. I want to jump back up into the 6A West, and we've not really mentioned a whole lot of Greenwood here lately. They've been kind of quietly going about their business, 8-0, but it gets real for them this week. They're going to go up against Pulaski Academy at Pulaski Academy. I think, is that right, Leland? They're on the road this week.
They are at Pulaski Academy. Greenwood's first trip to Pulaski Academy since 2007, when it was the second round of the playoffs, and Greenwood won. I think it was 57-50. Tyler Wilson threw for 452 yards and 7 touchdowns in that game. So it's their first trip to Pulaski Academy, in 16 years. So that one's going to be interesting. The interesting thing too about Pulaski Academy, if you go back and look at they played twice last year. Greenwood won in the regular season conference game at Greenwood, 31-21. And then Pulaski Academy came back and won the state championship. And if you look at the starting lineup for that Pulaski Academy offense in that game, they were going to have a quarterback back, a running back, and their top receiver back. Well, of course, the quarterback, Kel Busby, suffered an injury and decided to focus on baseball and not play football. The running back decided to transfer or move back to Nashville, back to Tennessee. And then the receiver, John Mark Charette, has been out most of the season. I think he played 2 games. So he's been out. So they have 0 starters on offense back from that championship game. And yet they're still averaging 400 or 545 yards of offense per game.
Yeah, they're the schedule makers knew what they were doing for Greenwood, when they had Pulaski Academy and Little Rock Christian back to back in weeks 9 and 10. I mean,
Makes it fun for the fans.
well, and no doubt the Greenwood Little Rock Christian game will be fun next week for a certain someone who's going to get to go to that one, I'm sure. But
I'm sure.
this week, Greenwood's got to take the show on the road to PA, and Rick, I don't know if you've ever been to PA.
No.
It's a kind of a unique setup. Like
Yes.
they've got the stadium kind of nestled inside all the school buildings there, and it's just a kind of a quaint little place, and it's a very very intimate kind of setting.
So the
And
football stadium is surrounded by the school buildings?
that's that's kind of the way I saw it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's on one end zone, they have their field house and their weight room, and there's some trees and stuff behind it. But behind the visiting stands and in the other end zone is part of the school. And Graham, you described it perfectly. It's a nice setting, and and that place is going to be packed on Friday night because, Central Arkansas, first of all, wants to see the game. And I think they want to see, Greenwood and, of course, Kane Archer. And, last week in the 56-20 win over Russellville, he threw for 3 touchdowns, and he ran 16 times for 180 yards and 4 touchdowns. And so they've kind of displayed this other side of their offense. They've been reluctant to run him much because you just don't run quarterbacks much anymore for fear of getting them hurt. But they kind of, maybe unleashed him a little bit on Friday night, and it definitely adds another dimension to their offense.
I'd like us to talk real briefly too about the 4A4 again. So Lamar gets another win against Little Rock Hall last week. It's there, right up there with the top 4 teams in that 4A4 conference at 4-2. Central Arkansas Christian is 5-2, but so there's this log jam of first place teams, and there's going to be some movement here this week, or else we're going to start getting the tiebreaker books out.
Oh, there's going to be some movement each of the next 2 weeks. And it could be any variety of things. I sat down yesterday just to kind of look and see, kind of try to formulate a what if scenario in that conference. And I just gave up because there's just so many scenarios left. And not only just so many scenarios, because a lot of times we look at a scenario and say, well, if this team beats this team, and we know that's not going to happen. Well, that's not the case in the 4A4. There are, 6 really, really good teams in that conference that really and truly could and have beaten the others this season.
Yeah.
Now, Graham, isn't our own Henry Apple coming out later on this week is like a scenario, if and bust, if this happens and all that. So that'll be interesting read. Henry's real good at that stuff.
Yeah, he's probably working on it right now as we speak, but that will be in the Democrat-Gazette a little bit later this week for sure. All right, so this is about usually the point of the show where we talk about this week's game. So, and we've already started on this, but in the 7A West, you have Bentonville West at Fort Smith Southside this week, and man, talk about another. That's a big one. That's huge for both teams. And, Bentonville West is still trying to stay in that number 2 position with a win. They're still there going into Bentonville week next week, but Southside could really make a move here if they're able to pull off the win against West.
Yeah, I think the winner of this game definitely has an inside track of finishing at least third. And like you said, it would still keep the possibility alive for West to, upset Bentonville. I think the big question there is, what is Carter Nye's status going to be?
Yeah. And Bentonville's going to play Springdale this week, and if Nye is even just a little bit questionable, I imagine they may try to hold him out this week. We'll see if we can get some answers on that. He did not take one snap last week at all. So They went, straight with the sophomore and proved that they could rally around him and win on the road. So, the other 7A West games, Rogers is going to play at Springdale Har-Ber, and that's kind of a man. If you're looking at if you talk about a game that there's a lot at stake there for both teams, but don't count out Har-Ber yet. If they score points, I mean,
they give up a lot though too.
They do give up a lot. That is true. So the other game is going to be Fayetteville Rogers Heritage, and in the Central we got Fort Smith Northside's going to be hosting a Cabot team. We haven't really heard a lot about Cabot really ever since the first couple of weeks of the year, but they've probably gotten better as the year's gone on. That's what a Scott Reed coach team does. So a lot of big games in the 7A conferences this week, and then of course we're still tumbling toward that Bryant Conway matchup in week 10. So that's next week though. And in the 6A West, we talked about Greenwood at Pulaski Academy. Another big game in the 6A West could be Van Buren at Mountain Home. That's a long trip for Van Buren to make up to Mountain Home. They might as well leave today, so they can get there in time. But both Mountain Home and Van Buren are 2-4 in the 6A West. The 6 out of those 9 teams are going to make the playoffs, and that's a tough place to go win at Bomber Stadium. I don't know when the last time you guys have been to Bomber Stadium. I've been there a couple times on a Friday night. It's a fun little environment up there.
The trip is just rugged, absolutely brutal. That's why you got to be ready. You got to be stretched out, ready to go as soon as you get off the bus.
In the 5A West, Farmington plays at Pea Ridge. We talked about, how the Cardinals are up there with Shiloh and Alma. So Prairie Grove visits Shiloh Christian, and Dardanelle visits Alma. And, big games all around the 5A West. None of those teams really can afford to drop one this week. In the 4A1, Ozark plays at Gravette. That's a huge game. Both those teams are battling for the number 2. They're both 4-1 in the conference right now. And, the winner of that one will be, clearly in second place. Gentry's at Elkins. The 3A1 this week, Lavaca at Boonville. Charleston comes up to West Fork. Hackett's at Greenland. There's still just a lot to be decided in these games this week. And, but for some of these teams, Rick, the time of the clock is ticking. They got to make their move now.
And, week 9 can be tricky sometimes. I know everybody's trying to get in playoff position. I'll use example of Lincoln. They've won 2 games in a row now. They seem like they're back on track after losing to Ozark and Gravette. And they got to make the trip all the way up to Berryville. And
it's Green Forest, isn't it?
I think they go to Berryville.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they go to Berryville. And one of the last thing I talked when I was talking to Coach Mendoza, that they got to stay focused on that game because the last typically week 10 you have your really big games, your rivals and everything. And Lincoln Wolves are going to host Elkins, but you can't look ahead to that game. You got to stay focused, take care of your business up there in the hill at Berryville, then come back and then get ready for those big final regular season finales. And I think a lot of teams are in that boat.
Yeah. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will roll with our top 5 of the week.
If you're enjoying this podcast, consider a newspaper subscription to the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette or the River Valley Democrat-Gazette. We have a special offer for our podcast listeners, so visit nwaonline.com/podcast23 to get started. You can also click the subscribe button on our websites, nwaonline.com and rivervalleydemocratgazette.com, or call us at 479-684-5509 and be sure to say that you're a podcast listener. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Prep Rally, sponsored by West Termite Pest and Lawn. And we're going to jump right into our top 5 of the week, and I'm going to start us off this week. And boys, at my number 1, I'm going right back to the Farmington Cardinals. Man, that's absolutely just a huge, a huge win for them, and could wind up with a conference championship if they keep winning. We'll see what remains to be seen on that one. Number 2. How about Elkins? with a shutout over a really good Ozark
Yeah,
team.
didn't expect that.
In a 4A1 conference clash. I mean, just a huge, huge deal. And really impressed with those guys. Dizzy Dean, Deshaun Chairs, Coach Watson, the defense like Leland talked about. I mean, they're playing really good football right now. Number 3, I'm right with you on those Lincoln Wolves, Rick. I mean, that was a big win against Gentry. Someone was gonna get a big win that night last week, and Lincoln, scores a whole bunch of points and gets the job done. And just really happy to see it for those guys. I remember when they came into the media day back in August, it was, there was some talk that they could be a good football team. They thought they had some pieces in place. And,
Yeah, and keep in mind the seniors on this team, they won 3 games as sophomores. So, and that just shows you how much they've progressed. So,
sure,
really feel great about those guys.
Number 4, we got to see a little bit of a milestone last week. Harrison's Reese Ricketts, outside hitter. She's 6'2", got her 1,000th kill in a night when when Harrison, the Lady Goblins, clinched the 5A West Conference Championship with the win, and they're the number 1 seed, played in the 5A state volleyball tournament this week. And along those same lines, 4A state volleyball is over at Shiloh Christian this week here in town. So if you get a chance, go out there and see that. And then, there was some really good, some really nice performances in the state overall tennis tournament. Some kids from Haas Hall and from Shiloh Christian, they had a boys singles player, did really well, and some teams from Haas Hall that really performed well. And shout out to those kids because they're going up against some Fayetteville, Bentonville kids that ended up winning the whole thing. And it's always really cool to be when you see these overall tournaments. The state, they still do the state overall in golf and tennis. They don't do it in basketball anymore. But I've heard of the days back when it was such a big deal, and you like to see those small school kids do well. So that is my top 5. Leland, you're on deck.
I'm going to start off with 8-man football. Subiaco Academy beat Genoa Central 52-22 on Friday night, the final regular season game of the year. In that game, Subiaco was down 16-8 in the second quarter. Brady Koch threw a touchdown pass to Chris Monroe. Then he ran for 3 touchdowns. Then he caught a touchdown pass from Chris Monroe. Then he ran for 3 touchdowns. Then he threw a touchdown pass to Anthony Gehrig. Then he ran for another touchdown to put Subiaco up 52-16 early in the fourth quarter. So, a 2-quarter span there. What a tremendous performance there. So to recap, he had a touchdown pass. He ran for 4 touchdowns. He caught a touchdown. He also intercepted a pass and had a fumble recovery on defense.
That's the 5-way there.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Now he didn't have touchdowns on the interception or the fumble return.
Man!
But he had an interception and fumble recovery. Now they go into, and it's the unsanctioned 8-man classification, but they play now a 2-week playoff, and they will host Corning in the first round of the playoffs on Friday night, and then they'll play maybe in the championship game the next week. And then I'm going to go back to Charleston. Dax Goff, of course, 4 touchdown runs. He had 275 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns, but he had a 1-yard touchdown run, a 26, 63, and 38-yard touchdown runs. Those capped 80-yard drive, a 74-yard drive, a 69-yard drive, and an 82-yard drive. Boonville finished with 53 carries for 446 yards, and they take command of the 3A1. And then Mansfield had a big win over Lavaca, 43-19. They rushed for 403 yards and 5 touchdowns. It kind of puts them in good position for that 3rd seed. They still have to play. They still have to go to Hackett week 10, but they're in good position to get that 3rd playoff seed, which is important this year because that means they will host a first-round game. And in that game, Daniel Burton, 18 carries for 272 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Mansfield needed that win too. They had a rough couple of weeks there with.
They had a tough couple of weeks, playing Boonville and Charleston, but they're still in good position now to get that 3rd seed. And of course, have to go back and talk about Southside. 77 points. Amari Tucker 302, 3 touchdowns. Carter Zimmerman 162 and 2 touchdowns. Isaac Gregory 93 and 4 touchdowns. And of course, teams don't rush for 554 yards and 9 touchdowns without a really good offensive line. And those guys have been good all season long with 4 seniors up front. And last, I'm going to step out of football for a little bit. And the last time that we checked in with Lexi Franklin from Boonville, she was holding up the state softball championship trophy for Boonville with a bandaged eye.
Yep.
Well, Monday, she won the 3A4 district cross country meet.
Wow.
Athlete.
How about that? Well, good for her.
And that's my 5.
All right. Rick?
Hey, one thing, Leland, Mari Tucker, the great thing about him, and he was our player of the week, and he missed all of last year with an injury. And for an athlete like that to rehab and come back, man, the kid just deserves a lot of credit. For me, my 5 for 7 is, state volley. I mean, we got state tournaments all over the place in volleyball. Even though it's called 6A, it's still the largest classification. So really looking forward to Fayetteville. They're 22-8. They're 3-time defending state champion, 3 in a row. Our man Paul Boyd did a really nice story on Reagan Harp in this morning paper, so check that out. Now let me go to Fayetteville. We haven't really talked to them for a couple weeks. They had really tough schedule early, but now they're really in control. The Fayetteville Bulldogs, they're still putting up all kind of numbers. If they just take care of business, which they should win conference championship again. I know Casey Dick got them focused on this week before week 10. So really looking forward to Fayetteville, especially when we get in the state tournament play. Bentonville, I wrote down Bentonville. That was a tough assignment to play Rogers, and then they had to start their 3rd string quarterback, Cole Slepecki. Everybody calls him Slep, I guess. So being simple-minded person, I'm calling him Slep from now on. He did a really good job. They're still 4. They've lost 3 games overall, Bentonville, but they're still 4-1 in conference right there. Slep did the right thing, had a couple of touchdowns, C.J. Brown. Bentonville West, they just destroyed Heritage. Now that's such a big game between West and Southside. That's probably for a lot of things can happen, this and that, candy, nuts, and all that, whatever that old saying is. But that's a really big game for both these teams, West and Southside. And, of course, I keep peeking over to the 7A Central because they have dominated in the last few years in the state finals and so forth. That they've won a bunch of them, whereas West used to rule. But I don't even know who either one of them are playing. I think one of them's playing Jonesboro, but they're still marching toward that big confrontation in week 10 when Bryant has to play at Conway, and that's going to be the biggest game of the year. I know people down at Conway, they're already lining up. They're already eager for that, but both teams got to take care of business this week. And then, man, what a way to end the regular season of high school football with Bryant and Conway with a lot of subplots in that.
Man, I'm excited. A lot of fun games over these next couple of weeks. So
fun time of year, isn't it?
We could do a whole podcast on some of them just on our own, I think. So, all right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap us up for this week's episode of Prep Rally. You can listen to Prep Rally at nwaonline.com, or you can watch it on YouTube, or just listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again to our sponsor, West Termite Pest and Lawn. Be sure and check out Prep Rally Live later this week. And look out for the River Valley Report online as well. With Leland's show, man, it's all River Valley, but it's some good stuff on there. And there's a lot of stuff you don't hear about on here, too. So check it out. And a lot of good football games to play, a lot of good volleyball this week. Go out and watch something. Thanks for watching Prep Rally.